I'd like for you to start by introducing yourself and tell us about your role in Libertas and tell us a little bit about how Libertas was founded and started.
Good morning. My name is Bob Nardo. I'm the executive director of Libertas School of Memphis. 11 years ago, we opened to turn around or transform a zoned enrollment neighborhood public school in North Memphis. This is a historic community, but one that's experiencing a very high level of poverty due to a major divestment of job opportunities here over the last couple generations. We transformed this school into the first charter school in the state to offer the learning method of Dr. Maria Montessori. It's an incredibly rich, comprehensive human development model. It's a lot more than just an academic model. It has a whole vision of human development. We launched this school, and we're both a neighborhood school, but also an open enrollment charter school serving a predominantly Black community here in North Memphis. And over the last 11 years, we've grown the school. We now serve infant and toddler, preschool, elementary, and a middle school as well. We serve about 750 students. Over the last couple of years, we've really been able to demonstrate how this model is really academically successful. We're a Tennessee Reward School, which means one of the highest performing schools academically in the state multiple years in a row.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dawn Bradley, and I am a founding volunteer at Libertas School of Memphis. 11 years ago, I heard about the school by watching a little clip of Bob on the news introducing a new Montessori school coming to Fraser, Tennessee. I interviewed, and unfortunately, they didn't have a spot for me. So I stayed and I volunteered for a while, and luckily, there was so much enrollment, I was able to become an assistant teacher and then a lead teacher. After I became a lead teacher, we started an in-house training program, a Montessori training program that I was the first graduating class. The day after I graduated, I became an assistant in the next iteration of that training program. I currently lead the training program of Montessori teachers here at Libertas. At the time, it was called Lumiere. Currently, it's called Arate. Over time, I've become the leader of the training program. So we have a grow your own licensure program here. So you can get your Montessori credential as well as your Tennessee State teaching license over 2 summers during the school year. I am the primary program director.
I'd love to know a little bit about the Arate program and how character formation is weaved into the training for teachers.
Arte is an ancient Greek word for excellence, often used in kind of virtue literature, very much like our school's name, Libertas, as a Latin word for freedom. And we know that you're only free when you have the virtues that allow you to excel in those intrinsic human capacities. And you can't give what you don't have. So for teachers to teach the really incredibly robust Montessori learning model, which, as I mentioned, it's a rigorous and personalized academic model, but it's really a comprehensive human development approach that embeds the formation of what we think of as character and virtue, others might think of as kind of social emotional skills, into the Montessori classroom. We've trained about 50 teachers for 5 partner schools across the Mid-South and continue to run cohorts every year. Dawn can tell you a little bit more as the director of the early childhood program there.
Our program is an immersive program where the teachers have the experience of being a student. You go into a fully decked out Montessori classroom and you're presented lessons as if you were a child from the teacher. Embedded in the Montessori curriculum is something called Grace and Courtesy. Grace and Courtesy lessons help children interact with their peers, interact with the environment, learn how to make the wisest choice, which is a form of virtual literacy, if you want to say phronesis, in a situation. So they're given situations like saying, "Excuse me," in the classroom. It's respecting your friend, it's respecting your peer, it's showing that you have respect for yourself and your environment. All of that can be embedded into their character and their character literacy and education.
So not only do you have those explicit lessons in grace and courtesy that Dawn mentioned, which are, manners and respect, but there's also implicit character development. Kids in the Montessori classroom from the age of 3 or 4, they're being taught to use a glass pitcher, right, to carry water across the room, to do various works, or to water the plants and trim the leaves, to prepare snacks using, real metal tools. These are things that you can break. These are things that you can get cut with. But Montessori knew that you actually had to invite children to develop this sense of responsibility, the fortitude, the concentration. Another feature of the Montessori classrooms, children each have a little independent workspace, which they roll out on a rug. Dawn, what does that rug denote in the class?
It shows everyone that this is my workspace. Please respect my workspace, and I'll respect yours.
Right. So all of the virtues associated with community life, even at age 3 and 4, this is an age where people assume kids are sort of impulsive by nature. But Dr. Montessori found that's quite wrong. That's an artifact of environments that are not developmentally appropriate for them. But when in fact you give them meaningful work of the hand that invites a level of concentration in which they can be habituating and even becoming conscious of the sort of embedded character, traits of, self-control, persistence, etc. So those are ways that character is addressed both explicitly and implicitly in Montessori.
In the training program.
Thank you. That's very insightful. Both of you, I understand, participated in the MA Character Masters from University of Birmingham, England, and you have been active members in the network KPCL previously and advancing character. Now, what theoretical frameworks or conceptual frameworks that you have used in Libertas, and how did you use it?
I'd love Dawn to talk a bit about the initiative she's working on right now.
I have 2 initiatives that have
Please.
come from the master's program and our partnership. One is called Staging Virtue, which I'm really excited about. I work with the primary team. Our school has expanded over the past couple of years. Just went up to the 5th grade for several years, and now we've expanded to a middle school. We've always talked about virtue. We have a virtue curriculum called Acorns to Oaks here at the primary school. But as kids get older, their needs are different. The way that we explain virtues for the youngest children is through fairy tales and stories. We also have virtue circles where they get to talk about real life scenarios. We give even little kids the time to grapple with the gray areas of life. But for older kids, we anticipate that they'll have different desires, needs, and they're more like pack animals, and they're trying to figure out their position in life, in society. But I created a program called Staging Virtue, where children can act out those virtue scenarios. Instead of just talking about them, they can play a character in those scenarios so they can practice them when they actually encounter them. And we do this first by having them look at images. So one is of somebody climbing up a mountain, and we say, what kind of virtues does that person need to have to finish their journey? What does their face look like? Do they look like they're content? Do they look like they're struggling? What feelings might that person be experiencing right now? Now you embody that by making the same pose. Tell me how you're feeling in this moment. If you're imagining yourself climbing a mountain, trying to finish something that's really, really difficult, what qualities do you need as a person to finish that? That's like one of our first initial meetings. But the goal is for them to create their own skits where they're bringing up situations in their own lives where they have to grapple with the gray. In the future, hopefully they'll be able to react quickly in those situations because they've had so much practice in staging virtue. That's one initiative that I've started. And then the other is called the Shared Table, and this is for parents, and it's for all divisions of the school. Are you familiar with Sequoia dinners?
Yes.
I have that same format for parents in the evening. We have a nice dinner, and we have 3 questions at the dinner because my goal is for parents to get to know each other. We've got a super diverse group of children at our school. We have children with special needs. We have neighborhood families. We have families that are not from the neighborhood, 2-parent households, generational households. It seems like parents were not able to connect the way that they might hope. My analogy is many parents will send home a birthday invitation to their child, all the classmates in the class, and nobody comes to the birthday party. It's because parents don't know each other. They're not connected to one another. It's not the fact that your child doesn't have friends, it's that you don't have any friends, is what I tell the parents. So the idea behind the shared table is as a way for us to see commonalities between these different families so that we can become more of an attachment village as adults for the children. So we focus on one thing each dinner. For example, one night was all about resilience. And the first question is, when has your family had to overcome something hard? Everybody shares something that's very common and similar. Another question is, who taught you how to be resilient? You'd be surprised how many people said their grandmother. It was one way for everyone to see another person's perspective and to see how close we are actually. I got this idea from another school leader who presented about a book called Culture Shock. He said that he would just have a town hall meeting with families and they would just hash out all their differences. I didn't think that that was going to be the most effective for our, our school. So that's how we came to the dinner. But I feel like that's one of the most transformational things I've been able to be a part of at the school.
Dawn used the term attachment village, and this comes from attachment parenting theory. Particularly influential for us is a guy named Dr. Gordon Neufeld, who really convincingly demonstrates in a way that aligns to the work of the character education field, the kind of emotional prerequisites to a lot of the work of maturation that needs to occur. His vision is that the attachment relationship, I know I can depend on you to care for me. It's only when I know I can count on someone that I can go out and take risks emotionally. When I can't count on someone, either because they're not there or it's an exploitative relationship, I build a sort of a wall. I defend myself from the experience of vulnerability. And that might look like acting tough. That might look like a kind of withdrawal. But I think to bridge over to the broader conversation about the character education literature, I think one thing we've really tried to do is take seriously the concept that virtue and character education is a matter of minds, hands, and hearts. That's actually our mission statement, cultivating the minds, hands, and hearts of children in Memphis for lives of wonder, work, and love. And our main methods are first what Dawn said, which is the relational. We don't have a disciplinarian in our school. We have what we call an attachment village team, which is all about dealing with behavioral symptoms through relational repair work and meaningful work of the hand of the child. That's that underlying paradigm. And the core of it then for students is a literature-based approach. We have about 100 different folktales, fairy tales, poems, and traditional stories and beautifully illustrated picture books from across civilizations and history, but with a predominant focus on African-American authors and illustrators, because that's our student body. We do interactive read-alouds. It's totally in-house and developed, but it's also available for free online, anyone who wants to use it. And it uses all this beautiful literature in a developmental sequence, looks at different virtue themes, and explores them through interactive read-alouds. That's our approach. The hands-on Montessori classroom, the heart work of the attachment village, and then combining that with the clear vision of excellence through literature.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Can we build on that and just describe to us how character education is woven into day-to-day operational school day? Like, how do we see it manifest itself in the school?
Several times per week, in some classes every day, we have a virtue study time. This is in the schedule, and it's either interactive read aloud of some of these pieces of literature, or it's the virtue circles that we present some of the scenarios that Dawn was talking about for children to grapple with and think, what's the missing virtue here, right? What would be too much of a behavior or feeling? What would be not enough? So we're trying to combine all three of those aspects. So it's a daily practice. And again, because you can't give what you don't have, we do this with teachers. Every month, teachers spend an hour in a professional development session doing the exact same work, reading the literature. In fact, Dawn, I'd be interested, what's a particularly meaningful virtue study you've done with your teaching team?
I think honesty and prudence, I don't know. So many of them are so impactful. I think over the past several years, we've made them smaller, the virtue study group smaller. I think that the main thing is that my teachers are able to really share their vulnerabilities and say, I'm really working on my prudence in this way, in my relationship with my family, in my relationship with my children, in my relationship with my students. Watching people grow over time through these small virtue studies, I think that's been the most impactful thing.
That's a beautiful point about how the content and the relationship, though, come together. And we try to bring this everywhere you go. The student assemblies, the hallways are filled with artwork, quotations, portraits of some of these men and women, images from these works that we do with students. It's not a lesson you do and put away. It's meant to kind of suffuse the whole environment.
That get me to my next question, which I'm curious about. Do you see an impact of the character education and Libertas practices in students, teachers, and community?
I understand this is important. And, running an urban public school where we're constantly looking at attendance and grades and state test master, we're a very data driven organization. But we're deeply convinced that true character is as much about interior motivation as it is external practice. We certainly give parents feedback about their children's behavior and their conduct, but I think it's presumptuous to kind of evaluate someone's character mostly from a behavioral standpoint for what that could reinforce. The ways we've tried to handle that is through a lot of reflection. At the end of the day, it's less about us grading their improvement in this virtue, which is a lifelong work, than about them becoming actively conscious that these are domains in which they can pursue excellence, and they are setting goals and reflecting. We have virtually 100% student participation from the fourth grade through middle school level in that written reflection. There's other things you could look, like behavior. We have one of the lowest suspension rates in the entire school district. It's about 90% less than the school had when we took it over and turned it around, and we haven't had one student expelled in 11 years. We have a very high level of family involvement in the school, and over like 95% of the parents are involved in the school, and similar rate give us, satisfaction every year. So that's sort of culture and climate, which isn't necessarily the same thing as character, but those things are maybe, indirect reflections of creating a really positive school climate.
We don't have a lot of quantitative data about character and virtue literacy and that kind of thing for teachers. But I do want to add to the culture of the school piece. I think that when I get new teachers, they're braced for a lot of negative feedback. They're braced to not want to work with others because they think that I've got to prove myself and I've got to be the best. And the culture of the school is such that they come in and they're welcomed and they're allowed to share when they're weak. They're allowed to share their strong points. They're allowed to collaborate. By studying virtue in those small groups and having those vulnerable conversations, it's like a springboard for everything else, for everybody else to gel together. I think it allows teachers to be more humble. They don't have to know all the answers. I think it allows for a lot of reflection, like Bob was saying. I think that's another springboard for our continued growth. I don't think that teachers are ever trying to be in a silo. Once they drink the Kool-Aid, they don't try to be in a silo because they realize the benefit of working together. I think a lot of that is from our virtue study and our conversations and our character work that's embedded in the school. I've got two anecdotal things. I have a 4-year-old at the school, and I have a 12-year-old daughter who did not attend the school. My 4-year-old's idea of right and wrong is just so much more solid than my 12-year-old's. He's very vocal about that is not right. We do not do that because, and he'll have a very good thought out explanation for a 4-year-old. I mean, I know it comes directly from his virtue circles. And then when we started staging virtue and we started asking survey questions, what do you struggle with? What are you good at? And so many of the kids had a good understanding. I am not good at making choices. It's do you look before you leap kind of situation? And no, I don't. I'm working on that. That's a skill I'd like to grow in. I'm just impressed with how reflective the kids are as well. That's all anecdotal.
That's great. If we talk about what do you see in the future of Libertas?
An unintended result of staging virtue is the adults that come in to support staging virtue have more understanding of virtue, and they're taking it and having conversations with me later. Oh, I want to work on the same thing that the kids are working on. I just wonder about a broader community impact with the dinners that we have. I'd love to expand those to more of the community so that not only is the school an attachment village, but the whole neighborhood is an attachment village.
That's a beautiful idea, Dawn. From our inception, we've had a very strong focus on community membership, and we work very closely with a lot of neighborhood partners who come in. They tutor the children. They help us offer enrichment programs. We collaborate to help people become first-time home buyers or start businesses. It's really a sense that the village is, bigger. I think that's a beautiful idea. A couple things I'd mention. One is we're now starting to plan to open a high school right here in our communities. I want to use this as an opportunity to delve children even more deeply into literature from a virtue perspective and equip them to undertake a life journey, knowing that we're already doing this to some extent at the middle school. We read Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist, but also we're doing Dickens, we're doing the African epic Sundiata, we're doing Tolkien, we're doing Lorraine Hansberry's Raisin in the Sun. I mean, we're doing some really meaningful texts, not only as a source of, eloquence and linguistic expression, but again, as virtue texts. What are the challenges that these people are exploring, and how can they help me perfect my own life? And I want to deepen that, can't wait until we can read Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man with students in high school, and they can see that through line all the way from the ancient Homeric epics up through modern America. Help students see beyond some of the false dichotomies and some of the racial and economic barriers that in a city that I love, my adopted home now of Memphis, unfortunately, we really still struggle with a lot of de facto segregation, and people internalize it to an extent. And I want to help overcome that and help our students see that they are truly inheritors of a transcultural tradition of human excellence that they can carry forth to the next generation. That's kind of my ambition at a cultural level for our students, and what I hope our high school can do. On a more practical level, I would love through our teacher training program to be able to help disseminate some of these practices as well to some of our partner schools. It will be no small accomplishment if we can have trained 100 Montessori teachers that reach 2,500 children a year or more, so that low-income kids across the Mid-South can have the same kind of education for the whole human person. I think this is maybe one of my biggest ambitions in the discourse around education reform in America. There's this sense that, like, well, if you're poor, you get this kind of emergency room version of education that's just the basics. I think we need to overcome that and see that our kids are just as capable and just as deserving of a really rich liberal education that the most elite. Because, if this is a free country where we have to govern ourselves, then our children need that just as much as anyone to help make the future that we want.
That's great. Thank you. I have one last question. Advancing Character brings K-12 educators, practitioners, researchers, higher ed faculty together, and we try to make a contribution to the field of character education. What do you see that's needed? What do we need to focus on in the future?
In many ways, our virtue study literature-based program, Acorns to Oaks, that we were both talking about earlier, is very similar to the Nightly Virtues program that the University of Birmingham put out. They have a wonderful program. Ours, it's not a copy of theirs, but it's a similar in concept, but totally adapted for a different community. I love the literature that they have, and I think a lot of it could speak to our students, but there's real differences in the community. By taking a similar sort of conceptual framework, but using other excellent content that speaks a little more directly to the community we have, I think we're striking the balance between what is particular and what is universal. I think we could see more examples of that. It's not a matter of copying what someone else is doing, but taking it and adapting it to the unique needs of your community. And then I also think we don't always have a good sense of fidelity of implementation of initiatives. I would urge researchers to take programs like this and really look at fidelity of implementation. How thoroughly is it being implemented? How well engaged with students? I think that would be a really interesting area for researchers to help us triangulate this problem of what does it mean to really grow in virtue in a way that's not purely behaviorist, but that captures the questions of motivation as well.
The main thing for me is adapting. If we could have blueprints that are broad enough for others to take it and tailor it to their community, and more accessible language for those who want to practice. Like I had to go through a master's program to be able to access some of the language. Some things need to be pared down so that there's an entry point for just your University of Memphis graduate teacher, something that they can pare down for their kids and not sugarcoat it with SEL. Call it Aristotelian virtue, but pare it down enough that it's digestible for both teachers and parents who aren't immersed in the character world.
There's a tendency in academia, we have a very complex way we talk about these issues. I want to shout out the Jubilee Center. They've made some really digestible materials to help people cut through some of the noise and have a more accessible, clear conceptual framework. If we can find just a clear way to communicate to people, this isn't another optional thing, but actually gets to the very essence. Random lists of core values or random SEL workshops are not a sort of coherent way to do this, but can be components of a better thought through system. I think there's a big market and a big need if we can more clearly and concisely articulate this for people.
I definitely agree with you, because most of the time people want to know, how do we do this? Can we see examples? And what kind of impact can we can expect? These are the things that we need to highlight, not just a school, as you pointed out. It's a community effort, which I appreciate you folks are doing that. Thank you so much for agreeing to share your knowledge and your experience with the community, and the information you shared are very valuable. I learned quite a bit.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.